Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Al Merritt. I'm one of the three selectmen with Arthur Burke and Bob McKendrick. Today I have with me here Bill Gustus, who's our town administrator. Bill is our chief operating officer for the town. He's responsible for all the town activities except for the school department, which is the responsibility of Superintendent Bob Hassett. Well, I must admit that I'm excited at the start because I see we're positioned in the nonfiction section of the library and the media center at the high school, so that's good news. We're here today to talk about our 2012 budget and the April 25th town meeting. We thought this might be a good way to get the information out to people throughout the town because, frankly, the information has come to us late this particular business cycle. It was only in the middle of February that we received information that our group insurance premiums for our employees were going up 16% or over $900,000, and that put us into a place where we had a deficit we just couldn't solve by traditional means. So we've had to do a lot of different type of planning and developing, and we're going to be talking with you about that. We're labeling this maintaining what you have built, because we believe that this town has built for generations now a wonderful place to live, and we're going to be talking about maintaining level services, and it's a decision that voters are going to have to make at town meeting in terms of spending your own money. We'll start with a brief discussion of where we are in 2011. We felt that because we were going to be asking for substantial cuts of expenses and also substantial increases in fees, that we should review Linfield's history with you and talk about the fiscal management and efficiency of our town. I want to go through a few things in that regard. First, we're regarded as having good financial position by Standard & Poor's and Moody's. These are financial rating agencies, and we're a AA rating, which is a very high rating. As you know, we've had no major layoffs or service cuts in recent years, as many other communities have had. We also have very modern school buildings and well-maintained buildings overall. We really have no deferred maintenance in town. In terms of efficiency, we believe we have a pretty high-performing and efficient town. One of the ways to look at that in our two major budget categories of schools and the public safety is as follows. Our schools are our low-cost, high-performing schools. We're ranked in the bottom 15% of Massachusetts communities in terms of cost per student. The lowest 15% is where you want to be. There's about 340 school districts, and we're number 280. So we have a very low-cost school system. However, we're also ranked in the top 3% on the 10th grade MCAS scores for English, math, and science. So we have very high-performing schools in terms of the academic standards. This is great. It's an amazing combination. My hunch is many other communities would trade numbers with us in a heartbeat. I was involved in the screening committee for hiring the new superintendent. I can assure you we interviewed many people who were in bureaucratic central offices of communities around the state. And as you may know, at our school system, we have a superintendent who has 2 secretaries, and that's it. It's important to note that schools represent about 61% of our total town budget. So we're efficient in that area. Public safety, our fire and police, is another 9% of our town budget. And our operations are less costly per resident than any of our surrounding communities. A lot of that is because we have a call fire department, and a lot of that is because their work is very dedicated to EMS these days, for which we receive insurance reimbursements on all of the calls that we take. So the town receives about $500,000 of reimbursements from insurers in response for the calls we do. And our police staff, as you probably know, is among the lowest in terms of any of our surrounding communities. So this is 70% of your budget. Other town services such as town hall, library, senior center, and DPW are really staffed only to provide basic services. I've been very involved with this town for 15 years and have spent a lot of time with all of these departments. And I'm proud, and I hope you are too, of the service that they've been giving. There is a sense that things can be wasteful in town, but I just don't agree. And I've been a senior manager for 30 years, and I'm very attentive to that. So I think we do a very good job in town with our staff. But Linfield is by no means an inexpensive place to live. Most of us are here because we want single-family homes on reasonable-sized lots. and we have high property values in town. However, we have a very low percentage of commercial property taxes in town compared to other communities. We have 8% of our revenues from commercial taxes. Other communities have about 17% or more than double. That's important to note because commercial users do not use many town services. In particular, they don't use schools, and the commercial revenues are actually used to help subsidize the residents in the community. So we don't have a lot of commercial taxation. However, we also have a high percentage of students. 20% of our population is students, compared to about 15% statewide. What that means is that we have 1/3 more students to educate than the typical town. So when we have only half the revenues from commercial operations to help defray residential costs, and we educate 1/3 more students than the typical community, we have a very challenging situation to deal with. We believe residents consistently support quality, basic services. And in recent budgets, we've maintained those level services. We've had very stable employment the last few years. We have minimum program cutbacks. Service levels have been maintained despite declining revenues. You'll hear how Massachusetts local aid has declined a lot, and frankly, our other costs have gone up in certain areas. But the service cuts that have been suffered in other communities have been avoided in Lynnfield. We simply don't have many bells and whistles in town.
Al has given you some idea of where we are now. I'm going to try to give you some idea of how we got here. In fiscal 08 and 09, we significantly added to our reserves in anticipation of the recession. We were able to do this because we received a cash payment of almost $1.5 million from National Development as part of the approval of the Market Street at Lynnfield project. Understanding that we were going to need that money to work our way through the recession, we put much of it aside in our reserves. And then in fiscal 2010 and 2011, we used these reserves to ride out the recession and maintain our services at the same levels they had been previously. We also used some federal stimulus funds to supplement our own revenues within the school department in order to maintain the high quality of education that our students enjoy. However, at this point, we have lowered our reserves to minimally prudent levels. We are currently at about 5% of our total budget in reserves, and our rating agencies that look at our credit have told us on numerous occasions and all other communities that this is a prudent level to keep, and we shouldn't spend any more of our reserves. Our Selectmen and Finance Committee have recommended maintaining our current reserve level positions and also to end our structural deficit. If you look at this next slide, you'll see that over the course of the last 4 fiscal years, we have seen a decline in our local aid of over $1 million, and we have seen an increase in our health insurance costs of over $1 million. Combined, these events have robbed our budget of approximately $2.1 million over that 4-year period. Now I'd like to give you some idea of where we are going. Our FY12 budget recommends basic level services. That means no new full-time positions. It maintains our current staffing, and it adequately funds all of our current services. However, for FY12, the recommended level of services budget is $1.5 million higher than our anticipated revenues for the same period of time. So, how do we balance the budget? There are really only 3 things we can do, or a combination of those things. 1 is to cut expenditures, 2 is to raise fees, 3 is to raise taxes. And our options are to use 1 or more of these options and close our budget gap.
I'd like to take a moment and tell you the Selectmen's philosophy as we developed the business plan for next year. Again, we started this late in February. We determined that we wanted to maintain level services because we thought that was what the community would want to do. And we decided we would raise revenues to close one half of the budget gap. That would be about $750,000. And we wanted to raise these revenues by generating fees that direct users paid, not through an override. We also wanted to cut spending to close one half of the budget gap, again, $750,000. We felt that residents and employees alike must contribute to closing this budget gap. The revenue sources that we cited are to institute a pay-as-you-throw trash program, which would convert $350,000 of costs that are presently in your property taxes into additional fees for people throughout the community. That will be Article 9 of the warrant. The school committee has instituted bus fees, roughly to the tune of $250,000. They've acted on that a few weeks ago. Our buses actually cost us about $650,000 a year, so this is not a trivial category. And should we not get ridership to pay those fees, we will be operating fewer buses and will make economies that way. We recommend adoption of a local meals tax that I'll be discussing shortly, known as in Article 8. And the selectmen intend to raise some town fees where we're below competing or nearby towns, and that we believe will generate about $50,000 a year. Again, only the users would be paying those. So total revenue generation would be $750,000. A moment on the local meals tax, a revenue item, Article 8. We could have done this in 2009, but the town meeting rejected it at that time, frankly because no one else had done it. No one else had adopted it. Now, most North Shore towns have adopted it. This would add 0.75% to your meals bill. That would be 75 cents on a $100 meal, 38 cents on a $50 meal. And unless you only go to Linfield restaurants, you're probably already paying the tax. Reading, North Reading, Wakefield, Peabody, Saugus, Boston, and many, many others have this tax now. And this tax will generate about $100,000 next year to help balance our budget. We expect about 75% of that tax will be paid by people from outside Linfield who visit our restaurants on Route 1 particularly, and that this could double when Meadowwalk is up and operational. And again, it will be being paid primarily by people not living in Linfield. Another revenue source is pay-as-you-throw trash. I've become the poster boy for this, even though I didn't support this program until we had a true financial need in February, and I do now support it. By way of background, you should be aware that trash pickup procedures will remain the same, as will recycling procedures. Residents would purchase a Linfield labeled bag at a designated local store. These bags are of two sizes. One is 15-gallon, which holds about 15 pounds and would cost $1. The other is 30-gallon, which holds about 30 pounds and would cost $1.75. Here is a sample of the smaller bag. You can see there's a cinch at the top to tighten it on with. And there's a label, a town label, and some simple instructions there for people to follow. This bag is a little stronger than your basic hefty trash bag that you use. Seniors, smaller families, and recyclers will use one bag, and larger families and non-recyclers may use more than one bag. The annual family cost will range from $50 to $100 per household, again based upon the size of the family perhaps and the recycling habits. Currently, Linfield households dispose of an average of 2,100 pounds of trash annually each. Nearby pay-as-you-throw communities, however, average only 1,600 pounds of trash per family each. So communities not using pay-as-you-throw typically use over 2,000 pounds of trash annually each. So there's quite a difference there, and this comes from the pay-as-you-throw program. Trash volumes are reduced by about 25%, or for Linfield, it would be about 2 to 2.5 million pounds because we presently dispose of about 9.6 million pounds of trash a year. And what isn't trash anymore normally becomes recycled goods. And this is a voluntary program. It isn't a mandatory program that makes people, in terms of recycling at least, in terms of making people have to change their recycling habits. No one has to change their recycling habits. But people do because they are a little more attentive to it and because they don't want to buy the bags if they don't have to. So I call it voluntary in that sense. And both of these outcomes benefit the environment. And again, depending upon your usage, you pay for your trash accordingly. There are about 132 communities that presently use pay-as-you-throw in Massachusetts. We're trying to take care of the $350,000 a year we pay to Covanta and Haverhill to incinerate our trash. And what will happen under this program is that, under this approach, is that those monies will be reprogrammed for other education, public safety, and town services. This would avoid a Proposition 2.5 overhead, and more importantly, I think, it actually would close the final portion of our budget gap. I know this is a change for many people, but remember that most of this $1.5 million deficit is not being resolved by a broad part of the community. It's being resolved by targeted service users and, in the case of the insurance, by our town employees. So yes, this would affect people, but it's the only thing in this program that would really affect most people in this town.
I want to reiterate what Al said in terms of how we intend to close this budget gap. The Selectmen's philosophy calls for raising fees in order to close half of the budget gap, and the other half of the budget gap is to be closed by making expenditure cuts. The proposal calls for cutting $750,000 from the level services budget in such a way that it does not impact level services. There's really only one way to do that, and that is to cut benefit costs. In order to maintain level services, we cannot lay people off, and we would have to continue to fund all of our obligations to our employees under their collective bargaining agreements. So we have set out to have the employees concede $750,000 worth of benefit costs. We currently spend over $6 million in health insurance alone, and we have found a way to make cuts in that appropriation by moving our employees to either a new plan which raises co-pays and deductibles, or by entering the State Group Insurance Commission's plan, the plan that is offered to all state employees. Everyone must participate in this solution if level services is our goal. If town meeting does not approve the meals tax or the pay-as-you-throw articles, or raise the revenue in some other fashion, layoffs will result. If town meeting doesn't approve the meals tax or the pay-as-you-throw or some other revenue raising option, the school committee will not impose busing fees. What happens if we don't reach consensus on these issues? Unfortunately, failure of one aspect of the Selectmen's plan impacts all others. The gap cannot fully be closed on the backs of either the taxpayers or our employees. Taxpayers will not likely increase their taxes and fees to maintain our employees' health plan, which is, in some minds, a Cadillac health plan. And employees are not likely to concede those health benefits and suffer job losses as well. What happens if the Selectmen's plan is not accepted by our voters? Well, we cannot really cut our fixed costs or our debt. Our expense line items have been level funded for at least the last 3 years and are at minimum levels as we speak. And if we can't raise revenue or reduce our health costs, the only option will be to cut payroll. in order to get into balance, not only will we have to cut $1.5 million worth of payroll, we would also have to cut an additional $600,000 worth of payroll in order to pay the unemployment costs associated with these layoffs.
Bill has mentioned we have budget cuts if we don't get these revenues and make the other cost savings with employees' health insurance. One way to look at that, since it's all people, is to take a look by department. You'll see this slide covers the fact that there would be 8 positions cut from DPW. There would be 8 positions cut from our public safety budget. There would be over 3 positions cut from our town budget, and 35 positions cut from the school budget, most of which would be teachers. Townwide, that means 55 positions or so to cover the $2.1 million of costs we would need to fund both the budget deficit and the unemployment that would come with it, cutting people. In summary, the level of service budget results in a $1.5 million budget gap, and we're proposing to solve it by cutting spending by $750,000 and increasing fees by $750,000. We're not proposing, the selectmen are not proposing a 2.5 override. It avoids that. Frankly, there's no assurance a big or small override would pass either. This will set us, in terms of looking ahead to fiscal year 13, it'll set us in a position where we have no structural deficits to make up. We will not have used reserves this year, which would be just one-time spending out of savings. We would be, for the first time in a couple years now, where our revenues and our ongoing expenses were level. Next year will be a bit of a challenge too, but we will not have the same type of challenge as we've had this year, that's for sure. And again, this would remain, our services would remain at current levels. I do want to thank the Finance Committee for their work also on this project. We've worked closely with them from the start. We knew we had some challenging matters, and a number of them joined with us in investigating some of these options. And in the end, as you know, they voted overwhelmingly to go along with this budget and the approach to solving our budget gap. We're really close to a creative solution now. I ask that you please consider the overall package and not just an item or two that might affect you only. That's a very big request, but if it's a small item and we're solving $1.5 million issue, and what's on your mind is a small chunk of that, I ask you to consider the overall good of the town and to please go along with this particular program. We thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you Monday evening, April 25th at town meeting.